Everyone wants to go viral, but what happens when the trend turns dangerous? From a $100 condom stunt that ended in a body bag to a fire challenge fueled by isopropyl alcohol that no one could scream their way out of. By the end of this video, you'll never look at your FYP the same way again. It was July 18th, 2019, in San Antonio, Texas. The air was hot and dry, even late in the evening, with warm air sitting still between buildings. Inside the dorm, the room felt close and stuffy, with barely any airflow and the kind of heat that lingered. Kyle Leal was 20 years old, going into his second year of college. He shared a small dorm room with two other students. That week had just ended. No classes, no deadlines, just a night to relax. According to his friends, Kyle wasn't known for doing anything reckless. He worked part-time, kept things in order, and usually stayed out of trouble. But that night shifted over something that didn't seem serious at first. They were sitting around, passing a phone, scrolling through TikTok. Short clips, reactions, challenges, most of it quick and forgettable. Then one video made them stop. It was the condom snorting challenge. At first they laughed, said it looked fake, and said no one would actually try it. Someone pointed out that it looked dangerous, but then one of his friends offered $100. Kyle paused, but not for long. He said he'd do it. I get why that money caught his attention, but risking your safety for something like that should never be an option. They cleared a small space and set a phone down to record. Kyle stood near the bed, holding the condom between his fingers. No buildup. He brought it to his nostril and inhaled. Fast and direct. At first it looked like it worked. He pulled back, made a face, and even laughed once. One of his friends reacted immediately, as if it was already over, but it wasn't. Instead of stopping in the nasal passage, the material continued backward. Within seconds, it slipped into the back of his throat. Kyle coughed once. Then again, still upright, still trying to control it. At that point, it didn't look serious yet. He bent forward, gagging, trying to force it out. Then he inhaled again, quick and instinctive. That breath pulled the material deeper. Now it was lodged out of reach. His coughing got harder, but less effective. He tried to reach into his mouth, but there was nothing visible to grab. The latex had folded and slid too far back. At first, his friends hesitated. One laughed, thinking he was still playing it up. Another told him to pull it out. Someone handed him water. Kyle tried to swallow, but it didn't help. The coughing kept coming, but nothing was clearing. However, his breathing changed, shorter, tighter. The coughing lost force. He started pulling in air in quick, shallow attempts. That's when his friends reacted. Someone stood up and moved toward him. Another tried to look into his mouth, pulling his jaw open, but still couldn't see anything. One of them told him to lean forward, hitting his back in quick, uneven strikes. Kyle staggered backward and hit the desk. One of his friends rushed over and tried to help, wrapping his arms around Kyle's torso and attempting abdominal thrusts. But it was rushed, not quite in the right spot, and nothing came out. At that point, it was clear this wasn't a joke anymore. Someone grabbed a phone and called 911. However, within the next minute, Kyle started to slow down. He was still standing, but barely holding himself up. His breathing turned shallow and uneven. For a second, it looked like he might pull through. Then his legs gave out and he dropped to the floor. By the time emergency services arrived, he was unresponsive. Attempts to revive him continued, but he was later pronounced dead. The cause of death was ruled as asphyxia due to airway obstruction. The material had lodged deep in the airway, blocking airflow completely and preventing it from being removed. Afterward, campus security and local police interviewed everyone involved to confirm what happened. The recording was taken as evidence and never released. The dorm room was temporarily closed during the investigation, before reopening later that term. If you feel this case is dumb enough, the next one honestly caught me off guard while I was researching it, because of how dangerous it is that no human in their right mind would do it. It was November 3rd, 2019, in Bandung, West Java. The afternoon was warm and a little humid, with cloudy skies covering the sun. The air was still, and people moved along the street at a normal pace while small groups gathered nearby, watching the activity. Sari Putri was 23 years old, known locally as a street performer, but online she was building something bigger. By 2018, she had started posting regularly on TikTok, short clips of her handling snakes, small tricks, and controlled interactions. Her following was still growing, but her videos were starting to get attention. Most of the time, she worked with non-venomous snakes. That was her comfort zone, predictable, controlled, safe enough to film over and over. But like a lot of creators, she started looking for something bigger, something that would actually stand out. That's how the idea came together. They turned it into a TikTok-style challenge, a snakeboard game. They taped out a grid on the ground, grabbed a foam die, and assigned each square a different interaction. The goal was simple: make it to the final square for the big reveal. That final square was the cobra. And honestly, this is the part that's hard to wrap my head around. Turning something like that into a challenge was already dangerous from the start. I don't know how it even felt like a good idea in the moment. The king cobra that day wasn't hers. It came from a local handler she worked with occasionally. Normally, it stayed secured and was only shown from a distance, and that distance was what kept things manageable. But for this, they changed that. They set everything up around the camera. The smaller snakes were placed on the early squares for quick, controlled moments. The cobra was placed in the final square, out in the open, fully visible. From the moment it was brought out, it didn't look calm. Its body lifted slightly, hood starting to spread. It followed movement around it, not relaxed, not passive, just contained in a space that wasn't really secure. Still, they kept going. The first rounds went smoothly. Sari moved across the grid, landing on squares, picking up smaller snakes, reacting for the camera. From the outside, it still looked under control. It still felt like content. Then she rolled again and landed on the final square. She stepped forward just a little closer than planned. It didn't look like much, but it was enough. The cobra reacted instantly. It lifted higher and struck her lower leg, just above the ankle. The contact lasted less than a second before it pulled back. For a moment, everything just paused. Nothing seemed to change. Sari stepped back and looked down. 2 small puncture marks, no heavy bleeding. When someone asked if she was okay, she said yes. She stayed in frame, still talking, still aware of the camera. The recording continued, but within minutes her movement slowed. The energy dropped out of her voice. Around 10 minutes in, her speech began to soften. Words weren't as clear. By 20 minutes, people around her started noticing. But there was hesitation. There was no visible worsening injury, no bleeding, no obvious sign of how serious it was. That delay mattered because around 30 minutes after the bite, her breathing changed, shallow, more effort behind each breath. She sat down, saying she felt weak. There was no anti-venom on site, no emergency plan. At that point, the filming had already stopped, but the response hadn't caught up. About 40 minutes in, she tried to stand, but couldn't. Her speech had worsened significantly. Within seconds, she collapsed. That's the only time her friends panic. Someone called for help. Others tried to figure out transport, whether to move her immediately or wait. Time was lost in that confusion. By the time she was placed into a vehicle to be taken to the hospital, she was already unresponsive. Sari Putri was pronounced dead on arrival. The cause of death was neurotoxic envenomation from a king cobra bite. The venom affects the nervous system, gradually shutting down communication between the brain and the muscles. Movement weakens first, then breathing fails. Without rapid access to antivenom and respiratory support, the body loses the ability to draw in air. After the incident, the video was removed from TikTok. Authorities questioned everyone involved, focusing on the lack of preparation and the use of a venomous animal in a staged online challenge. The cobra and the other snakes were seized and transferred to a licensed facility. The handler's operation was shut down after multiple safety violations were identified, including improper containment and unauthorized use of a venomous species in an uncontrolled environment. Now, this next one is frustrating in a different way, because it starts with something everyone has done at least once without thinking twice. It was March 9th, 2019, in Digos City, Philippines. The afternoon was hot and still, with humid air settling over the streets and little wind moving through the area. Inside a small fast food shop, the usual noise carried on. People talking, orders being called, and nothing out of place. Daniel Santos was 21 years old, balancing morning classes at a community college with evening shifts at a fast food restaurant along a busy highway. Most nights followed the same pattern: work, clean up, go home. He wasn't reckless. He kept things steady. But by 2019, he had also started posting short clips on TikTok. Nothing major, just small workplace moments, jokes with coworkers, anything that might get views. That night, the idea wasn't random. It came from something he had already seen online. When he clocked in, a small birthday gathering had just ended. The dining area was empty, but decorations were still up. Balloons tied to chairs, plastic covers on tables, leftover trash scattered around. Daniel and two co-workers were assigned to clean up. At first, everything was routine. Then one of his co-workers untied a balloon, inhaled helium, and spoke in a high-pitched voice. They laughed. It was simple, familiar, but Daniel apparently wanted more. He pulled out his phone and showed a TikTok challenge where people were taking bigger helium hits and trying to hold the voice effect longer for the video. The goal wasn't just the voice. It was to push it further, get a stronger reaction, something worth posting. They went through a few balloons quickly, repeating the same bit while Daniel recorded short clips, but they ran out. That's when Daniel pointed toward the helium tank used to fill the balloons. It was a small portable cylinder with a nozzle attached, kept near the storage area. It wasn't meant to be inhaled directly, but to him, it looked like the same thing, just stronger. He said it would work better for the challenge and no one stopped him. He picked up the tank, brought the nozzle to his mouth, and opened the valve while inhaling. That's where it changed. The gas didn't come in slowly. It entered under pressure. Daniel took in a rapid burst of helium directly into his lungs. At first, it looked like it worked. He tried to speak, but stopped mid-sentence. Then his expression changed. He reached for his chest and took a step back. Within seconds, his balance gave out. He staggered sideways and collapsed to the floor. There was no struggle, no warning beyond that sudden shift. At first, one coworker thought he was joking. That hesitation lasted only a few seconds. The other moved in, calling his name, shaking his shoulder, but there was no response. They tried to wake him, but no reaction. That's when they called for emergency help. Daniel remained unresponsive the entire time. By the time responders arrived, there was no change. He was not breathing normally and showed no signs of regaining consciousness. He was transported by ambulance to the hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. The cause of death was identified as a cerebral arterial gas embolism. The helium had entered his lungs under pressure instead of normal breathing. That pressure forced gas into the bloodstream, where it traveled to the brain and blocked blood flow, similar to a stroke. The disruption was immediate, which is why he collapsed so quickly. After the incident, Daniel's co-workers were questioned, but no criminal charges were filed. His death was ruled an accident. The restaurant later let go of the employees involved for breaking safety rules and tightened access to equipment like the helium tank to prevent anything like this from happening again. And honestly, I understand that decision. A workplace isn't a place to mess around, especially when you're dealing with equipment that can be dangerous if used the wrong way. The next story goes the opposite way, where everything feels under control until one tiny mistake breaks it. It was August 2nd, 2018 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The air was warm and still, with the kind of late summer humidity that lingered even after sunset. Streetlights reflected off slightly damp pavement, and traffic moved steadily through wide open roads as people eased into a quiet evening. Rima Jensen, 19 years old, had just graduated from senior high school after years of competitive gymnastics. Balance, timing, and body control were things she had trained for most of her life. Based on my research, Rima started posting short videos online, mostly simple challenges and recreations. She wasn't widely known, just about 4,000 followers, but a few clips had started getting attention, and that was enough to keep her posting. When her cousin tagged her in the Kiki challenge, it didn't feel risky to her. If anything, it felt like something she could do better than most people. The idea was straightforward. Step out of a slowly moving car, match its pace, do a quick dance, then step back in. She had already watched multiple clips, and most of them made it look easy. They chose a quiet residential street that they all knew well. It was wide, with low traffic, and familiar enough that it didn't feel unpredictable. The setup was simple. Rima would sit in the passenger seat, one friend would drive slowly and another would follow behind in a second car to record everything. When they were ready, the car started moving at a slow pace, around 5 miles per hour. Rima opened the door and stepped out. At first, everything worked exactly the way she expected. She matched the speed of the car cleanly and kept her footing steady. For a moment, it looked controlled, like every other video they had watched. Then she turned her upper body toward the camera. That shift pulled her focus away from the ground. As she moved into her next step, her foot landed on a slight seam in the asphalt where the road met the edge of a driveway. It wasn't something you would notice at a glance, but it was enough. Her foot rolled slightly as it made contact. At the same time, her body was mid-turn and still moving forward with the car. That combination mattered more than it seemed. Her center of balance shifted ahead of her base before she could correct it. She tried to recover, but one foot was already unstable. She stumbled forward. Then she fell onto the road, landing close to the side of the moving car, just behind the front door. The driver reacted, but not instantly. There was a brief delay, about 2 seconds before the brakes were applied. During that time, the car kept moving forward. The rear wheel followed its path directly over where she had fallen. It rolled over her torso before the vehicle came to a stop. The entire sequence lasted only a few seconds. Emergency services were called immediately, but the injuries were already severe. Rayma was later pronounced dead. The cause of death was blunt force trauma with critical internal injuries. The weight of the vehicle compressed her chest and abdomen, causing damage to internal organs and rapid internal bleeding. Even at low speed, the force from a vehicle's wheels is enough to cause fatal injury when a person is directly in its path. The footage from the second car captured the sequence clearly. Investigators noted that the speed was low and there was no reckless driving involved. The trigger was a small loss of footing at the wrong moment, combined with the movement of the vehicle. After the incident, her friends were questioned, but no charges were filed as it was ruled an accident with no intent to harm. Her family later pushed for better safety awareness, allowing the footage to be used in local programs to show how quickly simple situations can turn serious. They focused on preventing similar incidents rather than placing blame. The next story is about momentum and what happens when your body keeps moving but everything else doesn't. It looks controlled at first, but the moment the car shifts, it becomes something he can't stop. It was May 14th, 2019 in Tampa, Florida. The afternoon was warm and humid, with light clouds drifting across a bright sky. The pavement was still slightly damp from earlier rinses, and the air smelled faintly of soap and water as cars moved slowly through the wash. Inside the shop was Luis Moreno, 28 years old, working long shifts at a hand car wash just off a busy road. Most of his day was spent moving cars short distances, pulling them forward, lining them up, guiding them into drying areas. It was repetitive work, but it made him comfortable around vehicles in a way most people weren't. Outside of work, he posted short clips on TikTok, quick challenges, small stunts, anything that might get attention. His account was still small, but he kept trying to grow it. That week, a specific trend had been circulating. Variations of the ghost ride or car surfing challenge. People would film themselves riding on or outside a moving car, trying to balance while it rolled slowly. The goal wasn't speed, it was control, timing, and getting a clean shot, and Luis wanted to try it. Late that afternoon, business had slowed. One of the last vehicles, a mid-size sedan, had already been cleaned and was waiting to be moved to the pickup area. The customer hadn't arrived yet, and the backlot was mostly clear. Luis brought it up to a coworker, just one clip, low speed, no traffic. For me, that's where it crosses a line. Standing on a moving car is already risky. Doing it with a customer's vehicle makes it worse. At first, the coworker hesitated, but later on agreed. The plan was simple. The coworker would drive. Luis would stand on the hood. They would let the car roll forward slowly across the open pavement while recording. Luis climbed onto the hood, placing his feet near the front edge and gripping the top of the windshield for balance. The coworker eased the car forward, about 5 to 8 miles per hour. The car moved smoothly. Luis held his position. For a few seconds, it looked controlled, exactly like the videos he had seen. Then he adjusted his footing. That small shift moved his weight forward, closer to the front edge of the hood. At the same time, the driver noticed they were closing in on a concrete barrier at the far end of the lot, roughly 15 to 20 feet ahead, and tapped the brake to slow down before reaching it. It wasn't a hard stop, but it was enough. The car slowed, but Luis's body didn't. His momentum carried him forward. His grip slipped off the windshield. Without support, he was pulled off the hood and dropped directly onto the pavement, just feet in front of the moving car. The driver reacted immediately, pressing the brake harder, but the distance was too short. At that speed, the car still traveled several feet before stopping. In less than a second, the front wheels reached him. They passed over his torso before the vehicle came to a full stop. The entire sequence lasted only a few seconds. Emergency services were called right away. Luis was unresponsive at the scene. He was transported by ambulance, but he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. The cause of death was identified as crush injuries combined with severe head trauma. When the car slowed, his body continued forward due to momentum. Without a stable point of support, he fell directly into the vehicle's path. At that distance, even low speed left no time or space for the driver to stop. Afterward, investigators confirmed the vehicle had been used without the owner's knowledge. They noted that while the speed was relatively low, the positioning, falling directly in front of the wheels within a short stopping distance, made the outcome difficult to avoid. The car wash faced internal review and liability concerns following the incident. Procedures around handling customer vehicles were tightened, and staff access to vehicles during downtime was restricted to prevent similar situations. If you feel frustrated on this story, brace yourself because the next one is similar, where something simple turns dangerous because of one detail people overlook. It was January 11th, 2020, in Newark, New Jersey. The air was cold and dry, with a steady winter chill settling over the streets. Inside a small apartment, windows were shut tight, holding in the warmth as a group of teenagers gathered, talking, laughing, and passing time late into the evening. Andre Bell was 20 years old, spending the night at a small birthday gathering with friends. It was the kind of setting that felt routine: music playing, food on the table, people moving around, phones being passed back and forth. Andre wasn't known for doing anything dangerous, but like a lot of people his age, he followed trends online, especially short challenge clips on TikTok. That night, one of those trends came up: the fire challenge. The format was simple, and that's what made it misleading. A small amount of flammable liquid, a quick ignition, and then immediately putting it out. The goal was to create a brief flame for the camera and react before it spread. At first, it was a joke. His friends laughed, said it looked easy, and said it would only last a second. Then someone suggested actually trying it. Andre agreed. Instead of using a small, controlled amount like in the videos, they grabbed what was available: a bottle of isopropyl alcohol from a bathroom cabinet. That difference mattered. From what I've seen, isopropyl alcohol spreads fast and gives off flammable vapors, so the fire ignites wider and burns longer than people expect. The liquid was poured directly onto Andre's shirt. It soaked into the fabric unevenly, spreading across his chest and shoulders. At the same time, the alcohol began releasing vapors, something no one accounted for. A phone was set up to record. Andre stood in the center of the room, leaning slightly forward as a lighter was brought close. The ignition didn't behave the way the videos made it seem. The vapors caught first. Flames spread instantly across his upper body, not in one small area, but across multiple points at the same time. Within that same moment, the fire reached the ends of his dreadlocks, which had also absorbed some of the alcohol, and that changed everything. The hair held the flame longer, keeping heat concentrated around his head and neck, while the burning liquid continued feeding the fire across his clothing. Andre reacted immediately. He slapped at the flames with his hands, trying to put them out. But that motion spread the burning liquid further across his shirt. The fire intensified instead of stopping. Someone threw water, but it was too little and too late to fully extinguish it. The flames stayed active across multiple areas of his body. He dropped partially toward the ground, but didn't fully roll to smother the flames right away. Those extra seconds mattered. By the time the fire was finally put out, the damage was already severe. His shirt had burned across large sections of his upper body. The flames had remained active long enough to cause deep burns, extending beyond the surface and affecting underlying tissue. Emergency services were called immediately. Andre was transported to the hospital in critical condition, suffering from extensive second and third degree burns across his chest, neck, arms, and parts of his face. The injuries covered a significant portion of his body, and the damage continued to worsen even after the flames were out. Despite medical intervention, his condition declined over the following hours. Andre Bell died at the hospital from complications related to severe thermal burns, including shock and organ failure. Afterward, Andre's friends were questioned to establish what happened. No criminal charges were filed, and the incident was ruled a preventable accident tied to a viral challenge. His family later spoke out about the risks of these trends, emphasizing how quickly something designed for a few seconds of attention can turn into a fatal outcome.